All right, lesson 12, Roman humanism, Ovid, Lucretius, and Cicero. So one poet, one philosopher, and then Cicero, well, he's all politician, but he's like about a half philosopher. I would not call Cicero a great philosopher himself, but he was a pretty good popularizer of philosophy. Another popularizer actually was Ovid, who's our first author that we're going to talk about tonight. Ovid really, more than anybody, is probably responsible for the popularization of Greek mythology. So he was kind of the Romans' Rick Riordan, and he took all these Greek myths and really made them sing and sizzle and crackle. And it's due to Ovid that Shakespeare and all the Renaissance people became super into Greek mythology and took so many plots and characters. So with Ovid, we really see the romance, the passion, and the drama of Greek mythology in a lot of ways better than the Greeks ever did it. Because, mind you, if you go to the ancient Greek sources, it's a hodgepodge. There's no one text which says all the stories of all the Greek gods and all the great myths. You have to go to Ovid for that. Let's jump right into Ovid. He talks about these 4 ages. Who can tell me without looking at the book, what are the 4 ages of man? So it goes gold, silver, bronze, and iron, correct? No, this is a typical idea that there used to be a golden age and then things have basically gone downhill from there. And at every stage of human history, people think there was some golden age and things are no longer so great. The idea that this race of men showed contempt for the gods and got punished is very, very common in all world mythologies. It's in the Bible, like the Hebrew Bible. So the men were wicked, and then God sent a flood, and then Noah came in his ark because men were wicked. The Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah in the Old Testament Bible because those people were wicked. And Lot, looked behind, and his wife got turned into a pillar of salt or something. So this also in Greek mythology, the idea that people were wicked, and then God has punished the whole world with a flood. So all mythologies have this. Now let's go to the Great Flood, which I thought was a very interesting passage. So if I ruin humans, don't worry, I can make more. So that motif of the original man and the original woman without sin and innocent, you kind of, whether it's starting over after a flood or whether they're the original ones, that is in common to Greek and it's common to Hebrew. So therefore you think maybe it applies to some deep truth about human nature. What I found fascinating about this, first of all, was the writing reminded me of Virgil, but better even. As Virgil was very immediate, good language. This is almost, to me, this is almost perfect. And this is some of my favorite descriptive writing of classical antiquity. In fact, I would say it is my favorite descriptive writing of classical antiquity. Poseidon's beard lies heavy with rain cloud. His hoary locks become a torrent. His garments run with the rain. I could just see that. It's like his beard becomes rain and his garments become rain and they run. And then he talks about what happens when there's the flood. Some farmer in a boat rows where he used to plow. Another sails past the chimney of his house. So that's an unusual thing, to sail in a boat past the chimney of your house, just like poking up out of the waters. Someone catches fish in a treetop. Mermaids swim through cities with curious wonder. The dolphins invade the woods and brush against the oaks. Birds look for perches and tumble, exhausted, into the sea. So I thought that was super, super cool because it's very wondrous, the idea of this flood. And then the next paragraph, Triton, summoned from down under, looms up above the waters, a blue-green sea god, wet-bearded, his shoulders strewn with barnacles. So I thought that was good writing, his shoulders strewn with barnacles, and so on and so forth. Okay, so Theseus, I thought that the description of the maze was pretty cool. Confusion and conflict in stone, deceives the eye with devious aisles and passages, as a doubtful river flowing and looping back sends its waters either to source or sea, so Daedalus makes innumerable windings wander and hardly finds his own way out again through the deceptive twistings of that prison. So I thought it was pretty good. We go on to Icarus and Daedalus, which is a very famous episode. But one of the things I thought was interesting was the way he says that the sun was kind of goofing around. The boy pushes his thumb into the yellow wax, fooling around the way a boy does whenever a father tries to get some work done. That struck home to me as a kind of thing a very observant writer would notice. And he puts a kind of universal truth in there in this particular story because, people do behave that way. And then far below, a fisherman holds his rod, a shepherd rests on his crook, a plowman handles his plow, and all look up amazed at those two humans soaring above as gods. Why do you think that's there, and what do you think that adds to break the point of view and go to the observer's point of view? Before that, we've been with Icarus and Daedalus, and now we're seeing people see them. How does that help set the scene or describe it? The contrast, they're in awe that these people are flying like gods, and then that makes it seem all the more pitiful when they fall. And it actually helps you see the scene because just like if you paint a landscape and you don't put any figures in it, it's kind of hard to see the scale. Or if you're designing a house in your architecture app and you put a human in it, then you can kind of judge how high the columns really are. Wow. If you go into St. Peter's in Rome, the Vatican, a person is like this high compared to the ceiling, and you're like, wow, that's a really big place. So to me, it lent a sense of scale to see these people far below, and you're looking at people looking up. And it also helped me visualize it. It's much easier for me to visualize people on the ground looking up and seeing someone flying than just imagining someone flying. There's one more line that really struck me there. The boy's arms beat the air, paddling without oars. It's almost like in a cartoon where you can see someone going paddling air, and then they fall. I could just see that. He's beating the air, paddling without oars. The poor boy, he's falling to his death. So now let's talk about Pyramus and Thisbe. Did you know that Romeo and Juliet was based by Shakespeare on Pyramus and Thisbe? Could you see how it was? So I want to point out a couple of things here. The lion, it says, the lioness wants to drink at the spring, her jaws red with a fresh kill. Thisbe runs all scared to hide herself in a cave, and she drops her veil as she runs. This idea of people being out in the wilderness and being cornered by some carnivorous cat is a motif which will come up at least 3 more times in our readings for the rest of this course. It'll come up in St. Jerome, it'll come up in Dante, and it'll come up in Boccaccio. Now, but basically a beast like that represents the dangers of force or passion. So the lion is a foreshadowing of somehow forces that are too strong for them, which I guess turns out to be true. One thing here, a very famous line, love will find a way. That's a great theme of Western literature, the idea that love will find a way. And it's almost like water or some element that really can't be stopped because it's part of nature. Love will find a way. And many songs have that line in it. Very famous idea, very famous thought. Up above that, they say, fire suppressed burns all the fiercer. And that's something that a lot of people say, well, if you just deny it, you'll make it worse. If you tell kids they can't eat chocolate, you'll just make them want to eat chocolate. So the suppressed desire for chocolate burns all the fiercer. Or you could imagine taking a basketball and pushing it to the bottom of a pool. And then when you let it go, it's going to come up with all the more force, the more you push it down. So again, I like to call out good writing when I see it. So these are lines which I highlighted. As he lies there on the ground, the spouting blood leaps high, just as a broken pipe sends water spurting through a small, hissing opening, sprinkling the air. So very visual, also uses sound, hissing opening, and it's a simile, right? Like a broken pipe, which I think everybody's seen. And then the next paragraph, Thisbe comes out of hiding. She starts backward pale, shivering as water stirs when a breeze ruffles the surface. That's a pretty good simile also. Now let's go to King Midas, also one of my favorite Ovid passages. So now what do you notice about the syntax there and the language, what he's doing there? What is he basically doing there? Tell me what device or what do you just notice about the writing there? It's basically a pile up of examples. It's a catalog of basically how he turns things to gold. In music, we call that riffing, or a comic. You riff on the same idea. Ovid is really riffing on the idea, repeating in different ways the same idea. Well, here's all the different things he turns to gold. All these vignette examples, little images, images, images. Then he touches the gift of cereal and finds it stiff and hard, because now he's seeing the downside of turning everything to gold. Molten gold trickles through his jaws when he tries to drink water. Now, let's go to this idea of mutability. Can anyone tell me what mutability means? Mutability is change, okay, or changeability, changeableness. This idea of mutability, people become basically obsessed with it, and there's a lot of good poetry written about how things change, the melancholy nature of how things don't last in human life. Enjoy it while you can. When you get to the Renaissance, you'll just see passage after passage after passage talking about how things change. And you'll see it in the next couple hundred pages of this book, that this is the announcement of a grand theme of Western literature. The eras change, nations grow and die like Troy, once magnificent, now ruins and tombs. Sparta, Athens, Thebes all flourished once, but now, like Troy, no more than names. So you can see how haunted they are by Troy. Troy has got into their blood. So I'm glad that we've read about Troy in multiple ways now. And you can see the ghost of Troy haunts the Western mind. Now, last part of Ovid, he says this idea of, we read before, you remember about Cicero, he talked about the importance of literature and how it would make people heroic because they'd want to have poems written about them and stories written about them so they could live forever in human fame and glory, immortalized in literature. But now Ovid is saying he also writes literature for immortality for himself, his immortality as an author. So not only does literature give immortality to Hector and Achilles and Odysseus and Socrates, who are written about, but it also gives immortality to the author. So Ovid says at the end, this is the last passage of the Metamorphoses, now I have done my work. It will endure, I trust. The day will come, I know, so let it come, to end my span of life. Still part of me, the better part, immortal, will rise above the stars. Wherever Roman power rules conquered lands, men shall read me and remember my name. Through all the centuries, if Bard's prophecies can ever come true, I shall always live. And it did come true in his case, because Ovid did immortalize himself, basically by stealing all these Greek myths and telling them kind of better than the Greeks ever did. So thus Ovid, a lot of violence, there's a lot of sex and pretty R-rated, but it's told in very good writing. Now let's go on to Lucretius, who's a true philosopher. There's two things he wrote about that we're going to talk briefly about. One is he doesn't like religion. I think he sees that it denigrates man. And piety means observing all with a mind at peace. But it's no piety to grovel, to flatten yourself and lift your palms to the shrines, or to altars with the blood of cattle. In other words, what is Odysseus doing, slitting the throats of sheep, and Aeneas doing the same thing? Like, if it weren't for religion, people wouldn't be doing these silly things. A hidden force thoroughly crushes human grandeur. All these mythical wind gods and stuff. He's like, why don't you just focus on human grandeur? So that's the idea, that somehow belief in gods dehumanize man or put man down needlessly. So a part of humanism is to say, focus on man. Quit blaming your problems on the gods, which we've seen and said a number of times. Stop blaming the gods for your problem. Take responsibility for your own life. Man up. Be a man. So the way I read this, Lucretius says religion gets in the way of that. So a big part of humanism can sometimes be atheism, or belief that religion could be bad for people. So that's probably the earliest time we see this idea. And the other thing, Lucretius says we shouldn't fear death. I kind of disagree. Like, I don't think it'd be that boring. Like, I could eat chocolate forever, right? But I kind of want to know how the human story is going to turn out. Then if once I'm gone, I won't know. By the way, when I had to go get this exam, and they put you out, and the doctor said, most people find it like the best sleep they ever had for like 1 hour. So they put me out so they could do this colonoscopy. And I swear, when they pulled me out of it, I felt so refreshed. was like, why did they have to take me out of that deep sleep where I was total peace? It makes me realize when you actually sleep, you're only kind of like a quarter sleeping or a half sleeping, and you're actually kind of you're not sleeping as deeply as you could. When I came out of the sleep, I was like, oh, that must be what it is like to be dead. Like that wasn't not that bad. So that's the other thing I'd say. On the other side is I think probably it's a relief from all the stuff that all the energy you're spending on everything. But for me, I could like sit around eating chocolate and peanut butter and watching what happens to the world and for millions of years and not have a problem with that. So we're all entitled to disagree with the great books. But I thought that the coolest point was how he said we have hell ourselves in our own lives. So he's talking about Tartarus and all these tortures down there. And he says we basically create those for ourselves in our own lives. So he says, happily, death will not take you to hell. If anything, in death you will escape it, meaning hell. For all those things people say exist in hell exist in our lives. We do have a Tartarus in ourselves. Tartarus is a name for hell. Who's Sisyphus? Anyone know that myth? Sisyphus? Roll a boulder uphill forever. That's his punishment. He rolls it up the hill and rolls down again. He has to roll it up again, roll down. So sometimes life feels like that. It's like that movie Groundhog Day. It's like keep doing the same thing. And sometimes when you're in school, oh my God, class after class. So Sisyphus exists too here in our own lives. To seek for power, such an empty thing, and never gain it, suffering all the while, means shoving uphill the stubborn rock, which only comes bouncing down again. And he talks about how the guilty mind tortures itself, and he says, hell does exist on earth, the life of fools. So he's saying if you are foolish, you make your life a hell anyway. So in that case, it would be a relief. Now let's go to Cicero, his treatise on duties, which we're going to devote, I think, all the rest of tomorrow to. So this is a very famous book, extremely influential on the rest of Western thought, and popularized a lot of ideas of Roman ethics and how you should conduct yourself in life. So it's kind of a guide to life for young people, and he wrote it to his son, who was a student in philosophy in Athens at the time, and Cicero himself was in exile after Julius Caesar's assassination when there was this big civil war. So let's talk about human nature. Man prepares his conduct by surveying the course of his whole life because he has reason. Man connects the present and the future. What great theme that we've been talking about is that. It's forethought. I would like to do Cicero's Ode to Humanity because it's a lot like a few other passages that we've read. Okay, so again, this idea of classical antiquity that man is a wonderful thing and man is worth studying and worth celebrating and worth writing literature about and everything, man, human, humanism, Roman humanism. So that's a good expression of it. The Greeks have it too. The Romans have it also. It changes with Christianity. All right, guys, I'm going to set you free. I'm going to stop recording. Good night.